Gracious Lord, we pray that you would speak to us in this place, in our minds and in our hearts, by the words of my lips and the thoughts that we form. Speak to us, O Lord. We are listening. Amen. Okay, my friends, here we are. It's the beginning of Lent, as we were already told this morning. Thank you very much. To next week, this Wednesday, we'll gather together here for Ash Wednesday to begin the season of Lent. It's exciting. Every year at this time, just before Lent begins, the church goes mountain climbing. You climb up on that mountain with Jesus and his disciples, just like Peter and James and John and the other disciples did. Follow Jesus up to the top of Mount Horeb. It's become to be known as the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus climbed Mount Horeb with seven of his closest companions. No, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong story. There were 3 in that story when he climbed the mountain, weren't there? There were 7 on the beach. Yes. While he was up on the mountain, the writer of Matthew tells us he was transfigured. His face shone as bright as the sun. His garment was as white as light can be. By him and with him and in him the glory of God shone forth. And suddenly the 3 disciples realized that they were not alone on the mountain. Talking with Jesus there were Moses and the prophet Elijah, standing in the glow of God with him. So the season of Epiphany begins with the glory of God speaking, "This is my Son." And now it ends in the same way, with the voice of God. The skies open up. The voice of God speaks. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And then it says, "Listen to him." When the disciples heard this voice of God, they fell on their faces terrified, as you might well imagine. But Jesus came and touched them and said, "Arise, don't be afraid." And when they recovered enough to lift open their eyes, Moses and Elijah were gone, and only Jesus was there with them. And so they came down the mountain with Jesus for this incredible high, this incredible experience. And as they're coming down, Jesus says to them to not share what they had seen with anyone until after he'd been raised from the dead. Well, what the heck did he think they were going to do? Who would believe them anyway, right? For those of us who are practical, busy humans, we might ask, why do we take valuable time away from our busy lives and focus on climbing a mountain to see God's glory revealed? There are so many other things we need to be about right here in the trenches. There are hungry people to be fed, jobs to be done, bills to be paid, children to be cared for, sick to be healed, grievers to be consoled. How can we take time away from all that to go up on the mountain and spend time with God? Mark Twain once said it this way, "You can't depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus." We climb the mountain of transfiguration each year before we begin the season of Lent to remind ourselves of God's awesome story and to remind ourselves of our awesome story in connection with God's story. We climb because there is a rough road ahead of us. We climb to share the vision that Peter and James and John beheld and to be strengthened for us as we return to the lowlands. In the coming weeks of Lent, we will be reminded that Jesus did not go straight from his baptism to heaven. He went out into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He walked the path of suffering. This year at Lent, we are going to go through the stories of Jesus in the context of what has come to be known as the 7 deadly sins: pride, avarice or greed, envy, wrath or anger, lust, gluttony, and acedia or sloth. And hopefully, we will be strengthened for that journey as we remember the glimpse that we have been granted of Christ's glory on the mountaintop. To the ancient Hebrew mind, there was something mystical about mountaintops. Mountaintop experiences in our faith journey give us something to hold on to for the rest of our lives. They have a lasting value. It shapes our spiritual lives for the years to come. Would you like to have that kind of mountaintop experience that Peter and James and John had? Would you like to behold Christ transfigured before you? I know that I would probably climb a mountain in order to hear the voice of God. What an awesome experience. In truth, we may live a lifetime and never have that kind of experience, never anything more than a lump in our throat or calm assurance in our hearts. But please know that if that's what you experience, it is enough. If other people than you have a wider range of experiences, if they shout and dance, or if they speak in tongues, then who are we to say to them that God knows what their needs are too? We cannot build all of our faith on the memory of one great moment with God. God calls us from the mountain forward into the future. And that usually means to come to the mountaintop to meet the problems of the marketplace. But know, my friends, that even when we leave that mountaintop, we do not leave God behind, because God leads the way into the world. The transfiguration of Jesus happened to strengthen Jesus before his journey to Jerusalem, before his journey to the cross. It was witnessed by the 3 disciples so that they and we might be encouraged in our faith. The spiritual reality, the spiritual power made evident that day had a purpose in strengthening our faith. And so we move to the second story for today. The second encounter with Jesus. It also had a purpose. It was to encourage the disciples in their faith and convict them to continue the work of Jesus in the world. So too for us. The disciples had been to the mountaintop and they went back down, and soon they witnessed the crucifixion of this man whom they had seen glorified. They were devastated. They'd been on a high with Jesus, and now they were as low as they could get. So what did they do? What did they do at that point? They went back to what they knew, back to the seashore, back to fishing. And they were out all night, and they caught nothing. As they gave up and came to shore, they noticed a stranger standing there who says, "Catch anything?" Which is the question everybody asks a fisherman, right? Did you catch anything? Their answer is typical of fishermen. They said, "Not much happening out there." Now, I know that when I hear fishermen, particularly some of the fishermen I knew, who could catch enough fish to keep a fish factory running, when I hear them say, "Oh, not much happening out there," they're probably doing that so that I won't go fishing where they just were. Because they want to go back, right? Well, these fishermen really meant it. They had been out all night and they had caught nothing. Not much happening out there. And so the stranger says to them, "Cast your net on the right side of the boat." "Right," they say. But they do it, and they catch a whole net full, 153 fish. The disciple John says to Peter, "It's the Lord, it's got to be the Lord." There's only one person who can fish like that. These men, who were fishermen by trade, received a wake-up call from Jesus that day, and their whole world was turned upside right. How was it that these few men could make such a radical change in their lives that resulted in such a radical change in the world? They had this encounter with Jesus. They encountered the risen Jesus, and it changed their lives, changed their vocations. They left their boats on the seashore behind them. I pray that our church will continue to be a place where people encounter the risen Jesus. I don't want us to be just another social organization, a club or a fraternity. That's not who we are. They all have their place, but a church is different. This has to be a place where people meet God as deeply and as meaningfully as possible, where they come to know the risen Christ personally through his disciples. The testimony of the New Testament is a picture of what God can do in individual lives. God is here. God is waiting to come into our lives and to make us what God created us to be, going outside the lines. We should come here each week expecting a miracle, expecting that God can do great things through our lives. The question raised for us by the text today is not how much light do you have, but will you let the light of God shine through you? The old spiritual light, which my church in Williamstown used to sing every year at this time, in memory of a wonderful African-American woman from North Adams, a woman who inspired generations of students at MCLA, raises the issue simply but beautifully. Sing it with me. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Peter and James and John saw Jesus in all his glory, shining out into the world. The shining was so apparent in his transfiguration. Now, Jesus is the light which enlightens everyone. We can reflect that light like a mirror back into the world. The light of Christ changes everyone it touches. The Gospel of John puts it this way: the true light that enlightens everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world knew him not. He came to his own home, and his own people received him not. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become the children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. Let me put it another way. We Christians have been given a gift of light to see beyond what our eyes behold. We have glimpses of the kingdom of God all around us. Those glimpses need to be shared. So during the season of Lent, I would like us to take that time that we call the time for the child among us, that witness time, and use it to give you a chance to practice sharing where the light has come in your life. Every Sunday we would be blessed if you would be willing to share a brief witness talk. Testimony of faith to help us to see God through your eyes. So I invite you to listen to those nudges that you'd like to quiet down in your own heart about your story. And come to me or to Nancy and let us know that you would be willing to share a story of God's action in your life. And if we don't hear from you, I may be calling on you to do so. I know that each one of us has at least one story, mostly more than one. So I want to conclude this message with two brief stories, and then let's sing together again the song that says it for us. First, a very brief story. A little girl who loved her grandmother very much saw the light of Christ in what her grandmother did, what her grandmother said, and the little girl observed, "Grandma must sleep in heaven with the Lord because she is so happy at breakfast." Next, this story about Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She was doing research for her famous book on death and dying and met a woman who was a member of the cleaning staff in a large hospital. This woman spent her days cleaning the floors, emptying wastebaskets, tidying up patients' rooms. The hospital staff, however, began to notice that each time that she finished cleaning the room of a dying patient, that person was invariably more content and more at peace. The woman explained to Dr. Kubler-Ross that she had known a lot of fear and a lot of tragedy in her life, as well as good times, when other people helped her to know about God's love. She had been up and she had been down the mountain. The worst time was when her 3-year-old son was ill with pneumonia. She brought him to the public health clinic, and he died in her arms while she waited her turn. All of this could have deeply embittered her. But she said to Dr. Kubler-Ross, "You see, doctor, the dying patients are just like old acquaintances to me, and I'm not afraid to touch them, to talk to them, or to offer them hope." So the hospital decided to create a new position and promoted this woman to special counselor to the dying. Isn't that the call of God to each one of us? To be special counselors to the dying. We cannot stay on the mountaintop forever. There are so many lives to be touched with the love of Jesus Christ, right down in the valley where we live. That's the most important lesson from the mountaintop. Let us go forth to touch others as God has touched us. And so the old spiritual says it beautifully. Let's do second verse. Let it shine till Jesus comes, right?
Let it shine till Jesus comes. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine till Jesus comes. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine till Jesus comes. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
On the holy mountain of transfiguration, we taste those sweet eternal joys. And at the seashore, we take strength from the strength of Christ, as together we prepare to walk our Lenten journey. May his name be blessed, now and forevermore. Let us pray. Doing what we have so often done ourselves, when we do not know what to say, when we're frightened, when we're angry or ashamed. We may say anything that comes to mind, no matter how foolish, how we wish sometimes that we could take back those words. Sometimes they have hurt our families, have led people to actions that resulted in unnecessary injury. How many times we fill the air with foolishness instead of keeping still, that we might learn what you are teaching us, instead of listening for the words that you would put in our mouths. We speak out. We have forgotten to meditate on your word. We've lost the childlike ability to simply enjoy your wonders. Lord, overshadow us again right now with your powerful presence. Lift your strong voice above our foolish chatter and stun us by once again revealing the glory of your Son.